Excellent. Well, I think we should make a start. I'm extremely grateful to Livy and Mark for joining me today to talk about one of the biggest challenges facing local authorities and housing providers, making waste and recycling work better for residents while creating cleaner, safer place to live. The challenge isn't just providing bins, it's creating an infrastructure that residents find easy to use, encourages the right behaviours and stands up to the demands of modern communities. Livy, please take it away.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Nigel. So welcome to this session on the lessons from the Byker Estate transformation. So what we're going to cover off today is a bit of a background to the project. I'm going to be sharing the resident and behavioural insights from the research that I was involved with as part of this project. Some of the communication materials and insights from the work that we've done and other things that could be done moving forward and for your own projects. And then we're going to move to a Q&A with Mark Whitaker from the Byker Estate. And he's going to be sharing all of his insights around the whole project. So far more than I understand or know about. And then you'll get your chance to ask the questions as well. So the background to the estate was that there was a residents' consultation that took place and a community pledge to take action on the things that were important to residents. And things that came up were waste and litter management, new fencing, trees, green open spaces and play areas. So this, the bin installation is part of a wider piece of work that the organisation are doing. And I should say, Mark is from Karbon Homes, who look after the Byker Estate. So that was a bit of already I've made a bit of an error on that one. And then so metroSTOR were brought in and they worked with, there were some architects working on the units that were designed for a pilot area. So this is an area of this very vast estate in Newcastle. And the pilot was delivered and I was part of that, doing research and insights, learning from residents, what was working, what needed to change, with the premise that then this wider rollout will continue to happen on the estate. And for those who don't know, Byker is a very famous estate in Newcastle, and it's famous because it was the design of it was an architect, I think, and Mark can clarify this, maybe in the 60s. It's kind of groundbreaking approach to setting it out, but with that comes some kind of logistical challenges when trying to retrofit in things like bin stores and cars and lots of other things. So Mark will be able to share much more about those logistics of working in this kind of environment. So this might be quite familiar to yourselves. You might have these kinds of things in the places where you're working, random bins around the place, wheelie bins overflowing, side waste, people fly tipping internally and externally. So those are some of the challenges that the estate faced, and the metroSTOR bins were installed. So these units in some areas, and then in other areas are these screened wheelie bins. So we're going to be talking a bit around the learnings from the two different types of these two different installations, and what's going to be sort of taken forward, what's worked, what hasn't, where we made adaptations. So you'll get kind of the real story of the experience. So when we finished this and put the report together in February 2025, it was from July to yes, that's right. Was it from 2026? No, 2025. Oh, I'm now getting very confused. It feels like we were doing this last year, so I think that should be February 2026. 3,340 tons of litres of recycling was collected. I'm not going to go through these numbers, but these are to give you a sense of what we did on the estate. So kind of takeaways from this, the things we want to champion is that 80% of surveyed residents were very or quite supportive of the scheme, and 79% of surveyed residents were actually recycling. And we were doing door knocking to talk to people. We put out a text survey, so we're trying to gather insights in lots of different ways. And we had 12 residents who did some qualitative research where over a 3-month period, they fed back to us, filled in questionnaires, did telephone interviews, and that helped us to really get an understanding from people who are very engaged with the estate. So our takeaways were that more people wanted to recycle than expected. Now, there's definitely a sentiment here that people in estates don't, or people in flats don't want to recycle. That wasn't what we learnt here. What we also found was, so in these estates, rather than having chutes, they had bin cupboards, and actually, the people we spoke to, most of them were using the downstairs facilities, even though we'd converted these bin cupboards to have all the recycling spaces in them. So if you are thinking about, the chutes, closing chutes, not closing chutes, we actually found that people, there's an opportunity to talk about now closing these bin cupboards because they were used less than we expected. The open bin areas were less popular than the bin units. It's harder to recycle due to the small apertures in the council bins, in the wheelie bins, and people didn't like to pull out an empty bin if bins were full and sort of move them around. Ground floor houses were often less supporters of the service because they'd had their individual bin taken away. So where they'd had recycling outside their door, they now had to use the shared bin areas. And people wanted to deposit their waste in the nearest bin, even if it was full. So people aren't very keen on walking to the next bin. And as with kind of in keeping with insights of generally around the country, there was confusion around things that was kind of like aerosols, foil, and foil pouches. So again, kind of things that came up, which there's already resources available to actually use communication resources to address. So moving on to the resident and the behavioural insights, what we discovered, so what we did, as I mentioned, we had 12 people doing these participatory research, and we paid them in vouchers. We had then people answering questions on the doorstep with the opportunity then of going into a prize draw to win some vouchers. And then we did a similar thing for people to win in the prize draw through a text message survey. And the numbers that we spoke to, the team at Byker were pleased with the amount that we'd actually been able to speak to based on their other kind of research that they had carried out before. So what did we learn? Well, when the scheme was launched, the interviewees we were asking them to report problems in real time. So they were letting us know when the bins were overflowing, if bins hadn't been emptied, if there were fly tipping occurrences, if things need to be adjusted. So there was more recycling capacity because we kind of initially were very conservative with the amount of bins that we made available for recycling. And where people were struggling to go and do their recycling because the bins were overflowing, and if they felt demoralized because they'd seen contamination. And alongside this, changes were made to the infrastructure. So the apertures were put in to make the spaces smaller, so people could put, it was harder for people to put the wrong things in the bins. I think the heights of the bins were adjusted, so there was less kind of less things falling behind the bins, so then there was less litter coming out, and there were security cameras put around specifically to target fly tipping, and these were cameras that could be moved from different spaces. So what did people say? What did the residents say? Before, people felt very demoralized. They felt embarrassed or ashamed when they had visitors because of the way that the estate looked with the litter and the overflowing bins. They also didn't like the smell of waste in the summer. And afterwards, they were very impressed with how much had been done. They felt there was 100% improvement. People reported having positive conversations with neighbours, and they were often surprised about how many people were recycling. But they still reported about some of the challenges with still people dumping bags. It wasn't, a complete transformation. There were still things that needed to be changed. And this is kind of echoed in the quantitative insights from the surveys that 78%, 78.6% of people were recycling regularly, and very supportive was 57.4%, and quite supportive 22%. So overall, and this is obviously the people who responded, and obviously there'll probably be a bias to the people who, you know, are prepared to open their door, prepared to send a message. They're going to be more engaged. But we are pleased with these insights. And what we found with the different recycling habits, we were looking at people, we looked at different demographics to see whether there were different trends that we could see. And we found that the youngest residents were least likely to have recycled. Residents who were between 36 and 45 or more like to have tried recycling and then stopped, and are also the most apathetic in the support of the scheme. So there was, we can see the sort of the differences here. But in general, we were finding that, you know, most people across the ages, more people were doing it. And I think some of these numbers will also be reflected in the volume of people we were able to speak to. So we didn't speak to that many 18 to 25-year-olds. So the differing perspectives of residents and houses versus flats. What we found was that people, like I mentioned, who lost their bins were the most unhappy about it. They were actually traveling much further to have to do their recycling than before. So, but they did acknowledge that it was much tidier. But for some people, actually, that meant that they couldn't do it. So people who were only parents, they couldn't leave their children alone, whereas before they had been able to. But the people in the flats felt they had better facilities, so they were happier, and they really noticed the improvements. So they really enjoyed that. We also had some differences with the people who had got the new bin units from metroSTOR versus the sort of open areas with the bins, and the people who just got the open areas with the wheelie bins wanted the nice the bin units. So a bit of insights into the recycling bag. Most people were using the bag that was supplied by Karbon for the Byker Estate, and this is one they had made specifically. So Newcastle City Council has a recycling bag. Theirs is actually a bit bigger, and feedback would be that this one was probably a bit too small for recycling, because actually most of the bin, once you start, is recycling. So actually you spend more time doing recycling than you do general waste. So the recycling bag could have been a bit bigger. What we also found is, like I mentioned before, more people we were looking, like, was there any kind of insights of people like on the top floors? Like, if the further you've got to go, does that mean you're less likely to recycle? And we didn't find that to be the case. We didn't find that more people were using the cupboards than were using the outdoor spaces. And actually what we found was that the way that people did their recycling was it was part of their routine. So on their way out to the shops, they would take their bag of recycling and they take it to those bins. So actually certain bins that were on certain walkways, some of the units were being used much more by people who are passing by than was expected. So these are kind of things that we're now thinking about is, okay, what are those flows of people who are likely to be thinking, actually, I'm going to use that one. It might not be what was allocated for me, but it makes sense on my journey. And why did people support the service? So the key points were that it made the estate cleaner or tidier. The main reason for using the bins was convenience. And people were motivated by environmental reasons to recycle. So, I mean, it might be a bias because they thought that's the kind of thing we wanted to hear, because that's kind of what you do have in research. But generally, people did really care. You know, people wanted to do the right thing. So they were keen to do it. And often these people had been trying to do it before, and bins that then were being contaminated. So they were pleased that there were proper bins for their recycling. What were some of the challenges and frustrations? Because we're going to be real here. Initially, that percentage of recycling bins was much lower than was needed. So those bins were overflowing very quickly. So actually then the bins were realigned. And in some places that was the case. In some places it's gone the other way. One of the interesting things was around the estate where there were different areas, and almost in every area, there's different challenges and different behaviours with the different demographics. So some of those are areas with older residents, some with families, some with individuals. And so, as Mark will explain later, no one area is the same. Smell was identified by a few people, and this is obviously because food waste is still going in the general waste bins. So that is a consideration around, if smell is something that people are talking about, introducing food waste makes a lot of sense. The distance that people travelled really was something that, and I'll share a bit more about distance here, and other people not using the service properly. So obviously people can see what other people are doing, so they can see where the bins have been contaminated, and that really frustrated people. So as I mentioned before, distance matters. So the proximity to the location is really important, that people don't have to travel too far, and they don't want to travel too far to put the waste in the bin. One of the things that I think was discovered really was that the people who want to do who are just going to do their general waste, they're probably they need the nearest bin. So the first bin that they get to should be general waste. The people who are doing their recycling, maybe they're prepared to walk a bit further. So again, thinking about where are people coming from, what are they most likely to do, and designing the configuration for them. So in terms of the communication materials, on the initial, when they initially got the bag had lots of things inside it, including a letter, some frequently asked questions, a map of the locations, and the recycling bag. Bin stickers were put on the bins that would need to be kept, so that the council didn't remove them, because there was a whole removal of the individual bins. And there was follow-up communications in the newsletter to tell people what was happening, how things were going, and feedback given there. There's also been other work done in terms of social media being shared around the fly tipping. There's been engagement campaigns with the children at the local school, and there's been posters put up on the sides of the bins, in some frames that metroSTOR provide. So that's an area to be able to provide up-to-date regular information. And we're just, the team at Byker have just received these stencils inspired by the work of Keep Britain Tidy. And so they've got different ones that they're going to trial in different places based on what the behaviour is there. So we've got the dumping waste costs X amount, and I think there's numbers that they can change that with. How many people have been fined for dumping waste? The arrows to send people to say more bins this way. There's a thank you for recycling, and there's a no fly tipping one as well. So in terms of fly tipping, bins alone aren't enough to stop fly tipping. And actually, Mark will share a bit more. They've actually, for the whole estate, because fly tipping is a fire risk, they've got a team now of 2 people who are constantly going around the estate collecting up fly tipping. So what was still happening is in those locations where there used to be bins, people started fly tipping. So this is where we're putting stencils, and there are still people putting fly tipping in the areas as well. So in terms of the communications to back this up, some of the advice and the things that I was sharing are based on kind of best practice. And if anyone's been to a webinar that I've done before for or metroSTOR, these are or have seen these with other people, these are the kinds of things that in kinds of the communication strategies that we're recommending to focus on. So using good social norms like I recycle, showing people on the in those areas, on those estates, who are doing the right thing, saying thank you for taking your rubbish home, thank you for taking your fly tipping to the tip, thank you for calling the council. Using signs that tell people how many people have been fined or caught in a particular area, reinforcing that desirable message, so 9 out of 10 people use the bin, be a hero, recycle, avoiding ineffective communication. So these are the kinds of things which will actually increase litter. So saying it looks ugly, saying sort it out. This was a campaign by Bournemouth, and they were saying an expletive at the beginning of these words. This actually reinforced littering. Again, saying 1 out of 10 people litter, because you're talking about the behaviour. So the general kind of communication recommendations that we've given to the team are to avoid negative messaging and telling people off, as this doesn't work. Reinforcing the desirable behaviour using positive rate framing, saying thank you for doing your recycling. Because also the thing is, there are those people who've already doing it. So if there's no acknowledgement of them, then they're going to get demotivated as well. If there's only ever messages saying don't do this and don't do that, they're going to feel like that what they're doing isn't making a difference. Using social norming messages, so highlighting what the neighbours are doing, because people are influenced by their peers. And addressing uncertainty. So what are those confusing materials? There's campaigns and there's communication materials that Recycle Now have got already showing all the things around aerosols and various other things. The aluminium people, I can't remember what they're called now, they've got a whole campaign around telling people to scrunch up the aluminium and give the metals a rinse. So all this stuff already exists. So it's not like you've got to reinvent the wheel and create all these communication materials yourself. These things already exist. So these things have been shared with the Byker team to use in their comms. For the fly tipping communication recommendations, the thing with the fly tipping on Byker and I in many other estates where I've been is there's two things. You've got the external fly tippers who are coming on often with their black bags to dump their black bag waste or their washing machine. So for them, it's really important to have external communication. So using the idea that like these principles from Bristol City Council that are using the I can't remember what they're called now, the yellow and black scrap signage. So really saying that people are being caught, having cameras there, letting people know that this is that things are happening. If residents have got door cameras, asking them to share their footage. And then with the resident fly tippers, you have got, maybe social media communications, you've maybe got posters and things like that. So again, telling them that people have been caught, because that's really from the research around fly tipping, and that's where the deterrents usually are. So what are the recommendations for future rollout? Assume people will recycle and provide a higher ratio initially, so the percentages split, or be prepared that you're going to be moving the bins around based on the percentages that the take up that you get. Include apertures and pictorial signs on all bins to reduce contamination. So the smaller the aperture, the harder it is for people to get things in. What you want to do, is for the general waste, they can put a bag in. You don't want them in the recycling to be able to put bags in, because then you're going to be contaminating with bags, and there's potential people who can put their general waste in. The screened bin areas were unpopular, and people they kind of were least prepared to walk very far to the bins. So the team are doing a lot of moving the bins around at the moment. So less of those and more kind of bin units. Including poster boards on each block to communicate key messages. So this is the thanks for doing the recycling. By the way, don't recycle. This is what you do with the thing. Aerosols can be recycled. This is what you do with your unwanted bulky waste, those kinds of things. And it's important with poster signs that you do regularly change the posters, because people become oblivious to them. Positively reinforce the desirable behaviours, and try out the chalk floor stencils to communicate different messages at different times. So I have got this is a piece of work that I did a couple of years ago with Cambridgeshire Council, and you can access this. I'll put the link to the this has got a lot of the comms that I've been recommending here, and the stuff that informed the work that we did with Byker. So you can download this and get the summary guide of initiatives that haven't worked, and they're relevant for fly tipping, littering, etc. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and we're going to hand over to Nigel and to Mark for Q&A.
Excellent, Libby. Thank you for that. Really thorough overview there of the results. So over to you, Mark. Please, if you would, tell us a little bit about the sort of background to the project, reasons why the trust and Karbon Homes wanted to sort of embark on this journey, and the factors perhaps that sort of led up to that, if you would.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Livy. Great presentation. I think Livy said it all, really. And it's clear to see by the kind of before pictures on that Livy presented there that there was a need to address the waste management side of the estate. When Karbon first merged with Byker Community Trust, a pledge was carried over to invest substantially into the estate. It was recognised there was a lot to do. We had internally bathrooms and kitchens to renew, and a lot of external work was like fences were due for renewal, outdated, and so with the external stuff, we decided to reach out to to the community and our customers and ask them what they thought was the kind of pinch points and what needed addressing. And they came back with, first of all, waste management was the first one. Fencing was one. They wanted to feel safe. A lot of antisocial behaviour issues. They wanted to see an improvement with CCTV. They wanted safe spaces for children to play, tree management and stuff like that. So this waste management side of it is a part of a massive project, really. But I think the waste management is the most important one. And if we ever only did one of the items that they mentioned, I think doing the waste management was the one which would have the biggest impact. So that was it, really. I mean, we took it from there. Yeah.
No, that's great. I just noticed there was a question about the number of residents or number of homes across the estate. Just remind us on that, because it sort of gives a feeling for the scale, doesn't it, of the overall project? I know this is only like a pilot for the first part, but just the scale of it, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, well, we manage the estate itself has around 2,000 properties. Obviously, we're right to buys and leaseholders and stuff like that. We manage around 1,890 of them, I think the current number is, with around 700 of them being flats. So they're actually contained within the Byker wall. The rest of the properties are just regular houses.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just a little bit more on the sort of the uniqueness of the estate to an extent. It's interesting for a number of perspectives, but probably presented some quite significant challenges from a waste management point of view, didn't it? Just to sort of give us a bit more on how that was actually working up to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the challenges were around the listed status of the estate. It's grade 2 star listed. So that means everything externally falls under the listing. So even down to the paint we use, the colours have to match in, every design. So that, for instance, the bin stores, the design that Livy showed of the bin stores had to go through rigorous consultation with the council, the conservation officers, like the historic England side of things. Everything had to match in what was currently there. Bikers could, I don't know if everyone realizes, but it's a very colourful place. We have blues and greens and reds, and one house can have 3 different colours within its fence, so everything had to align with that. And with that came lots of kind of backwards and forwards with our design team in the council. Worked really closely with the council on getting the design just right.
Yeah. So those 700 flats, there'd be a proportion that were on the ground floor, I guess, that may have had the wheelie bins earlier, but a significant proportion of them were served by chutes, were they?
No, there was no chutes in the flats. The flats on each communal area, so they have like a stairwell running through the flats, and on each sort of link out of the flats, they have a communal bin storage area, we call it, it has the meters in as well, which will pose a fire risk issue at some point. Certain surveyors can't understand why we let people go into there, and store waste, but that's another issue. But yeah, we have a concierge team from Newcastle City Council who empty the bin stores. So we upgraded them to recycling kind of depots, if you like. So the customers are asked to put the recycling waste separated with the general waste into them bin stores. The concierge team comes up every day and empties them into our external bin stores.
Yeah,
But the ground
complex
floor
arrangements.
properties, yeah, the ground floor properties all had single bins. So with that, one of the challenges when we initially went out to customers, a lot of them weren't really keen on losing the single bin and converting to a communal area.
Yeah. So, so just to come back to these cupboards on each floor, the recycling cupboards, do you think with the sort of reducing number of people that were using them, do you think you'll probably be able to actually remove them altogether?
Yeah, I mean, initially we were thinking about removing them, like at the same time we created the bin storage areas, but we thought it maybe a little bit too much too soon. We thought we'd kind of split it off and get people used to the bin areas first and then introduce that. And like Livy said in our presentation, there's not that many people, not everyone uses them, so I think it's something we will be looking at in the future.
Mm. And the number of bags, whether it's rubbish or recycling, that sort of left in the building, in the walkways and so forth, would you say that's reduced?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people on board with the recycling. There's a lot of people take their own recycling out now. I think a lot of it was because we didn't have the capacity. So people knew if they were taking a bag of rubbish down to the communal bin stores, if they were emptied on a Friday, by the Monday, they were absolutely chocker again. So a lot of people would just dump them in the communal areas within the walkways and stuff like that, knowing that the concierge team would come and take them away the next year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, so looking back over the sort of project, what changes have you seen on the estate that that have made the most difference?
Certainly the side waste. Like I said earlier, the capacity of the bin stores, we were massively under capacity, with no recycling. And now in some areas we've got 5 times the bins as what we had before. There's some of the bin stores are never full now, which is, some could say it was a bit overkill, but it's future proofed it, and it's great to see. We haven't got that sort of problem where the bins are full, people carrying the rubbish out. Because the bin's full, they would just dump it down the side of the bin. And with that, you would get vermin, you would get the wind blowing litter around, it was just... So I think litter on a whole is reduced because of that. Side waste, certainly. And just everything's just a little bit tidier in that area. And customer feedback, I mean, speak to anyone now, everyone who you're engaged with in the area is pleased with what we've done and can see the improvement.
Yeah, brilliant. So how's that changed, the way that the teams manage the estate? That must have had an impact positively.
Well, yeah, we get a lot less. We have a grounds maintenance team who sort of cut the grass, trim the bushes, do all the soft landscaping works around the estate. And with that, one of their tasks was to pick up side waste, litter, some fly tipping. The estate's kind of split between areas we have control of and adopted areas, which are Newcastle City Councils. And what you would find is if someone had fly tipped on the council's area, the council would have to pick it up. If they'd fly tipped on some of our areas, our grounds maintenance team would have to collect it. And over the last year, the grounds maintenance team, one of the figures that I got from April to December, they've had a reduction of cost of £5,200 for just tipping off, which is nearly 50% reduction in the same period of the year before. Also, a significant reduction in their time in litter picking and collecting this waste, which has led them to be able to go and do some like positive improvements around the estate, like edging pathways that they've always wanted to get to do, but like the time's been taken elsewhere with the side waste and the litter picking. So we can see it's like a double hit, really. We can see improvements all across the estate because they've got the time to do them.
Yeah, very good, excellent. So, so looking ahead, where do you see this project going, or how do you see it panning out as you move to further phases?
Well, it's certainly been received really positively by Newcastle City Council's waste team. They've seen a massive impact. The across the board, really, from the guys emptying the bins to the top managers who see a less fly tipping from themselves, left sideways from having to clean their areas. Byker's one of 3 wards. That's serviced by one team, really. And they've always said Byker was the most kind of needy. Took most time. So they've come back with some really great feedback that what we've done's made an impact to their side of things. Our senior leaders are really happy that Newcastle City Council's off the back, if you like, that we were working really closely together. And I think we'll see it roll out across. Certainly the next steps are going to be to look at doing the wall area, which is the flats. We have some fire risk issues to address around there as well. And again, the bins around there are just like collective sort of big Euro bins, like Livy showed in the pictures, which are, again, a bit of a mess. So we'll be certainly rolling that out in probably not in one go. We'll probably section it off into 3 or 4 sections, because the walls are a mile long, so it might be a little bit big to hit doing one hit. But yeah, definitely moving forward with it in the future.
Yeah, interesting. And Livy's already touched on some sort of the learnings that you've taken away from this. Would you expand on any of those at all?
Yeah, I think we underestimated how much recycling we would get for a start. So I think the ideal sweet spot is 50-50 capacity. I think we started at about 80-20, and within the first week or so, we were overwhelmed. The recycling bins were overwhelmed, like totally not what we expected. So I think we'd probably start off with 60-40 or 50-50. It was great to see a lot of people were more engaged than we actually expected. I think communication we should spend a bit more time doing that, like front loaded it with communication a bit more. I think for an example, we had round the back of Dun Terrace and Northumberland Terrace, a section of the wall, we had 3 bin stores. We went through the design stage. We had 3 bin stores and presented that to the community in an open evening. And a lot of people pointed out the kind of areas of travel. Either people came out left of that or right of that, and no one would be using the middle bin store. No one passed it on the way to anywhere. It was kind of in no man's land. So they said that the over 2 would get overwhelmed, because everyone would be taking the rubbish out when they're going out, leaving to go to the car, or the metro station was one side, the car park the other. So we kind of ripped them designs up and started again and made 2 bigger ones rather than 3, keeping the same capacity but splitting it off. So I think things like that, we wasted a lot of time focusing on that without actually speaking to the customers. I think it's one lesson learned is, like, the customers are key to this. They'll tell you what will work and what will not.
Yeah, interesting. So just looking through the chat, a few questions coming up from there. Did you find when you reduced the sort of the size of the opening on the recycling, did you find there were many instances of people leaving bags of recycling in front of the bins?
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, if people can't initially we had the recycling bins right at the front of the bin storage areas. So what we're finding is people were trying to overfill the recycling. Then, like I say, they would just dump it in the front. What we found is, by increasing the capacity slightly, but moving the recycling bins to the back, the people who would just put general waste in the recycling and mix it weren't doing that anymore. They were just using the general waste bin. So it's been difficult, because each bin store has its own kind of personality. They'll find some bin stores, recycling's absolutely perfect. People don't overfill it. They're using them really correctly. We find some where people are just pounding bags in left, right, and centre. They're pushing them into whether we've got an enclosure in or not. They're just spilling the bags, and then it's really difficult to try and, like, single it out of one bin. Like, each bin store's the same, So
Yeah, it's interesting. So you weren't finding too much recycling being left outside because of the size of the opening. And I guess, were most people using the reusable recycling bags, you think?
yeah, I mean, we had a little tear in our eye when we first launched the first bin store. We went up to see how it was going, and this guy came down with his little blue bag full to the brim of good recycling and used the bin stores. Like, going from zero recycling to seeing people actually using it correctly was like a proud dad moment. But generally people are, but in certain areas people they don't, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get everyone engaged.
Yeah. There's a quite interesting point that that one of the delegates has made about the fairly unique sort of background to Byker with the internal storage areas and the concierge service and how transferable the learning is. Would you agree that although those elements of it are very unique, what we're seeing is that a lot of, or the majority of residents are moving towards what we would regard as a fairly normal service? They're actually taking the waste and recycling out, and they're putting it into the bins themselves. So although the background is unique, we're actually moving towards a more sort of common model. Do you think that's a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, it's difficult with 700 flats. I mean, we will have to use that service until the last person, I suppose, decides not to use it. I mean, there's people have assisted lifts and stuff like that where the concierge will go to the door and take the rubbish away, people who can't get to the bin stores. And so it'd be nice to say we could eliminate that.
The and just yeah, so people get ready, start putting your hands up. We're getting towards the end of these. It was quite difficult, wasn't it, finding the right sort of level of capacity given space constraints and that sort of thing. What is the actual frequency of collections of waste recycling?
Well, for the council's bin route, if you like.
Yeah.
They do the internal. I don't know this exactly, but they come on Wednesdays and Fridays, one for general, one for recycling. But they do the outside of the wall, like the flat areas, alternative days to the inside housed areas. So it's once a week basically, but each area is on a different day.
Yeah, okay. And just one point to clarify for me, are the houses using the same bins, or do some of them still have wheelie bins?
Well, all the houses have their own wheelie bins. The problem we have is, for instance, we have a bin store near Graham House, it's a communal bin store for Graham House. It's right next to houses, low fold properties, and what we find is a lot of them properties are using this as an overspill for their single bins. So it's difficult to manage what capacity we need. Or, I mean, we've tried to kind of manage it with housing officers sending letters out, speaking to the residents, telling them not to use it. But we would rather they were using the bin stores than kind of dumping it around the estate. So it's difficult to kind of say, don't do that. And the worry is, what else will they do? What will they do with it then?
Yeah. Yeah. So one last question then. There was one earlier on about how we manage bulky waste. Not sure if we've covered that already, but yeah, just to confirm how they deal with bulky waste across the estate.
We don't provide a service to remove bulky waste, if you mean like kind of getting rid of mattresses and sofas and stuff like that. There is a kind of discussion going on whether it's something would be better to do, knowing that people would be inclined to fly tip it. Is it better to accept that fly tipping is going to happen and do something about it?
Yeah. So there's, and you can see from the photos that quite a substantial proportion of that was bulky waste rather than sort of excess household waste. So yeah, so ongoing sort of conversation around how you develop a strategy for that.
Yeah. I mean, we've increased the CCTV around the bin storage areas. What we found was when we had a lot of fly tipping around the estate, we created these bin storage areas, and then it kind of localized the fly tipping into the bin storage areas, and they weren't on the rest of the estate, but people kind of thought the bin stores were just somewhere where they could go and dump the sofas and the mattresses.
Mm.
So we have some, we put CCTV around each in storage area, started catching people and prosecuting people. And now what we've seen is it's back out on the rest of the estate, and people are not so keen on dumping it in the bin stores. So yeah, that's probably the biggest kind of challenge we're facing at the minute, is trying to get rid of the fly tipping. So looking at that question, do we provide a service to get rid of the bulky items rather than and accept that it is going to happen, rather than trying to catch it at the back end and try to catch it at the front end instead?
Yeah. So a bit of a work in progress there then. I think one of the things we're often finding now is that we can't just look at, refuse and recycling and food waste in isolation. We have to sort of include bulky waste as part of that equation, especially on the larger estates, because it's going to happen. It's how we have a plan in place to deal with that, isn't it? So not seeing your hands up yet, but Livy, you've got any other questions?
I would just like to add, so I think someone had said about, where we've sort of talked a lot about the estate being unique, and so these learnings aren't transferable. I would say, as I have put in the chat, is the principles are transferable. So the principles about working with residents, understanding, what their journeys are, because I've done this on other estates, and it's always thinking about, okay, if you live in finding out if you live in a top floor flat, are you going to come down just to do your recycling, or are you going to do it on your way out? So when I was working on another project around food waste, some of the older residents, they were coming downstairs every day to do their food waste so they could go and have a chat with somebody. So that's the thing, is you've really got to understand your residents. So, and that's the most important thing, is about thinking, who are your residents? What are their challenges? What are their motivations? And work with those. So understand them, and that will help you inform it. So that's what a really key learning from this is working with your residents, understanding them, thinking about their flows, where they're going to be going. Okay, if this is where the car park is, think about that. Really do some observations. People assume that people in flats do want to recycle. That's another kind of learning that we can take away from the other projects I've worked on. Think around the communications, positively reinforcing what people are doing. So this again is like a behavioral psychology principle that you can use everywhere, because people need to be reinforced. Let people know that other people are recycling. One of the challenges, so people recycle in households, semi-detached, 2-story, 2 up, 2 down. People recycle because their neighbours are doing it. So that's what the evidence shows. How do you get that social norming in a flat? You need to tell people that other people are recycling. So they need to know that, because what they see, they might see that, oh, people are just fly tipping, or the odd person is dumping their bags. So they need to know that the recycling's happening. So that's again, another principle that you can take across the board. And then really thinking about that communications piece. Just where can you communicate? How do you use those areas that you have got? So the bins are great pieces of real estate that you can put your commas on. I will stop now. Get off my soapbox. My recycling bin. Get off my recycling bin.
So look at more questions that we can put out. But yes, if anybody does want to put their hand up and put a question to either Mark or Livy, that would be fantastic. But in the meantime, so Mark, is there an actual bulky waste service if people were to apply to the council?
The council provides one, yeah.
Do you think people use it?
Council provide a bulky waste service.
Yeah. Do you know if people actually use it on the estate?
Not looking at the estate at times, I wouldn't have thought so. But I mean, part of Livy's work, we were kind of letting people know how the process to apply for that. It's directing them, signposting them to the website, and yeah.
So it does seem, yeah.
It's probably one of them things we would never know if they are using it. We only notice it when they're not. The fly tipping.
So when we asked people, so we said, what do you do? And well, again, so another thing is don't talk about fly tipping, talking about dumping waste. So fly tipping is something that councils and other people talk about. When people have got an item that they want to get rid of, they want to get rid of it. So when we ask people, what do you do if you've got an unwanted sofa? You know, they were like, oh, well, we would take it down to the local tip. Or people were like, oh, well, I'll leave it out for somebody else. Or, oh, but again, it's different residents, different challenges. Older people would say, the council will expect me to get my sofa down to the bottom of the steps, and I'm on, the third floor. So this is a challenge with the with that service that the council have, is that it's not a door-to-door collection. So and it depends, do you have a car or not? So again, this is where, engagement with your residents to understand what are those barriers to them using those services is really important.
Mm. And the upshot of that is, whether they use it or not, what does that look like in terms of actual time sort of allocation for the team, Mark, dealing with that sort of fly tipping?
Well, we now have, because of the walls now being categorized as a high-rise, high-risk building, and because there's a lot of fly tipping in the communal areas of the wall, and a lot of bulky waste items left lying around, we've employed two guys with a cage van, and they're constantly going around all day, every day, picking up stuff that goes into the wall. Because that probably doesn't take up all the time, they are doing all the rest of the estate as well. So if we see anything, we can give them a quick call and they're straight on it now. But again, that's 40 hours a week, 2 guys' wages, hire of a van, the tipping costs, I think that feeds into that part the slide delivery showed where it costs Byker £100,000 a year.
And so that's across the 2,000 properties then, pretty much.
Yeah. That just covers the Byker Estate.
Yeah. The question about whether food waste is included, don't think it has been, is it?
No. Going forward, we are though. Because during the time of kind of delivering this project, the council's view on recycling changed slightly, where we had separate glass units. Now they mix the glass in with the paper and the other recycling items. So with the older stuff, we can use the areas that we had for glass to convert to a food storage, if that's the route to go down. But it's kind of just getting rolled out across various areas in Newcastle as a trial. So we really don't know how that's going to look, especially in the wall areas and the flats.
Yeah, good. The question on the chat: did you see a reduction in contamination from using the smaller openings on the bins? I think we said that you did.
Yeah. Feedback from the council. Yeah, it's come back that it's a lot better quality.
Interesting question around CCTV. What mechanism did you use to identify persons? Was that sort of officer sort of knowledge, or how did that work?
To identify them, well, a lot of people are just literally pulling up in cars, opening the boots and chucking it out. That was an easy one. Or we would, believe it or not, a lot of people just leave the names and addresses on the IKEA boxes or the Amazon boxes, whatever being delivered. That's the only way, really, unless someone, like one of the housing officers or someone who knows people on the estate has got a clear kind of visual on them and knows who they are. The only way we can really prove it's by registrations or names and addresses on packaging.
Yeah.
And for residents, have you set up, not as an internal WhatsApp or something where you can check in with people, or you've got an internal way that you're checking it? But it might be interesting to share with people the CCTV, because it's not your team who are going through the CCTV. So you've got a process, haven't you? So there's a team, there's an organisation who are checking the footage and then presenting back to you the people, and then you're then checking if anyone knows them. So maybe share it on that.
Yeah, we have an external company who manages our CCTV and who we kind of rent cameras out if we need extra cameras, and called G&A. So if we find fly tipping, we can message them and say, can you have a look at Graham House bin stores between kind of Friday at 4 o'clock and Monday at 9 o'clock, and they'll just trace back through the footage and send us it. Yep, good.
A proportion of bins recommended for refuse, recycling, food waste. I think you said sort of ideally potentially as much as 50-50. Is that what you're actually going to do on the next?
Well, yeah,
basis?
I mean, I think whether you're doing, like when we started off, we were massively under capacities in the recycling, and obviously what doesn't go in the recycling goes in the general waste. So I think there's a set amount of waste per people using it, you know, per properties, if you like, how many bins you need, how many sort of individual properties go into a Euro bin, etc., etc. So you never really get the actual size of the compound too wrong. It's just about, if we put an extra recycling bin in, we would just change a general waste bin to recycling.
Yeah.
So 50-50 is the sweet spot, I think. I mean, everyone has 2 bins at home, and we kind of work off that. It's hard to tell when we're at ground zero. So it's just it's ever changing, you know. If we feel like the recycling's getting overflowing, we'll add another general waste bin in it and just monitor it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, great to see it's it's achieved so much, the program, in such a short space of time. Always a work in progress, isn't it? And looking for ways to
Definitely.
to improve. So thank you for that, Libby. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone that's attended, and the questions, participation. It's fantastic. Look forward to future events. Please let us know what you'd like to learn about next. And so, yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Right. Cheers.